Chapter 3, Textbook Lecture CAD 134, Basic AutoCAD for Interior Design. Hi, Joe Cerrone. We're going to take a look at Chapter 3 from our Basic AutoCAD for Interior Design. And in this chapter, we're looking at Command Set 1. And so what this author has done is he's grouped certain commands that you can use to create things like this dresser. And the learning objectives are to become familiar with the rectangle, explode, be able to create parallel and concentric objects using offset, and then to be able to create horizontal, vertical, aligned, and offset construction lines, or just basic lines, and then being able to work with trim, extend, lengthen, and object snaps. So let's get started. As we look at the textbook, we're looking at these different commands. And so in this command, in this chapter, we're going to take a look at the rectangle command. And the rectangle has several different options, and most of your commands will have different options for it as well. And so you can add a chamfer, you can change the elevation, you can add a fillet, you can change the thickness of it and the width, as well as prompt you for the corners of the rectangle. And it allows you to manipulate the rectangle command. And so the rectangle command is chosen from the draw menu right here, and then you can use the rectangle command, and here you can see the options for the rectangle command. And so we can go through and we can create this rectangle here. And it goes through quite a bit of text information to show you something that is really not that hard to do. We just go through and we create a rectangle, and then we tell it what size that we want to use. Now, it's important to use the proper units when you work within a drawing. And so we'll talk about that as well, because the default when you start a drawing is decimal units, and those are it's going to be a much smaller shape than a 16-foot by 8-foot shape. So as we look at that, and we were going to go into our AutoCAD, and I guess I'm going to have to pick a drawing. And so if I were to start something new, and let's just go to the main page. Let's see if it lets me. And so here we are in the start page, and you can see I've got a few other drawings that I worked on, and I did a couple of times some of them. You can remove them from the list by just clicking it right here. And so now I just have to remove one more. I'm pretty well up to date. And then if we wanted to start a new drawing, what would happen is we could say new, and when you say new, it just uses some of the default templates, and it actually didn't work right. So if I come back here to the start screen and we say new, it actually picked my ARC title block, and so it will remember that. But typically it's the AutoCAD, which is the default. And if you looked at the units, the default is in decimal, and so we want that to be in architectural units, so you just need to change it to architectural units and hit OK. The easiest way to work with architectural units is to use the architectural title block that we have that's already set up with the correct units and layers. And so if we said new, and then we chose our architectural title block, it comes in with all the title block layout tabs down here at the bottom, and it also comes in with all the layers set up and a number of other things that help us quite a bit. And so I'm going to just take it from here and use this architectural B-size title block as a lecture and create a rectangle. And so if we look at the command, we can go, and I'm going to use a different layer here. I'm going to use the furniture layer. Notice that the menu bar is on, and so here I can hide it. We can show the menu bar. We also want to make sure that we have all of our icons on the bottom. You can see everything is checked off here. And then if we use the rectangle command, we can select the rectangle command right here. And you can see rectangle now populates within this area here. I also have my dynamic input on. And so with it off, it would have to be input here with it on. And then it follows the cursor. And so it says just pick any corner for the starting point, so I could just pick one corner. And then it kind of wants to draw it, but if you go into the options where you type in D, or you select D for distance, so I could type D, enter, it wants to know what the length is, and so we'll say 16 apostrophe, which would be 16 feet. And then it wants to know the width, we'll say 8 feet, enter. And then we can then place it on the drawing by clicking with the mouse. If we turn our line weights on, we can see that. And then if we click on it, we can see that this is 16 by 8. Alrighty. So continuing, so we created this rectangle here. The explode command allows you to break things like a polyline or a rectangle into individual line elements. And so the rectangle is made up of 4 lines, but they're treated as one object. And when we explode it, what that will do is it will break them into individual pieces. And so here's our rectangle. When you explode it, you'll see that we have individual lines. And so if we come back over here, and we hit the explode command, and then we select our rectangle, and it looks like it's already exploded for some reason, but it's now individual lines rather than 4 separate or one component, versus if I made a rectangle and let's just say I just use 2 points to click, this is treated as one piece. And so if I moved it, it moves as one piece. But when you explode it, it breaks it into individual pieces then. And so if I wanted to maybe change this to orange, I could do that. Offset. The offset command creates parallel lines or curves and concentric circles or rectangles, polygons, a specified distance away or through a specified point. And so we'll give a demonstration on how to use the offset command. And so we can select the offset command, and then what you're prompted for is either through or to enter the distance. And so when we work with the offset command, if you enter a distance, so for example they drew a line and then they offset it 7 inches, you can then create 7 offset lines that are 1 inch apart. And so if we come back into our CAD system and we drew a line, and then we said offset 7, enter, you can then offset this line 7 inches. So offset's a very useful tool. We use it more than almost any other command when we start with just basic drafting. And so we'll use the offset command to create geometry. Here's an example that we can go through, and we can just offset each of these lines by 2 inches. And so we can have a line, a circle, and a rectangle. And so if we have a line, a circle, and let's make a new rectangle. And then we want to use offset. We can say offset, type 2, hit enter, and then we can offset these lines. And those are going to be 2 inches apart. Concentric circles, as well as the polygon, provided it wasn't exploded. Alright, continuing. Construction lines are the same as regular lines, they're just infinite in length. And so when you work with a construction line, it's infinite, and it basically allows you to create either a horizontal or a vertical or whatever line angle you want using this X-line command. And so we can create that. Now, one other thing about the offset command that we can do is we can offset it through a point. And so let's say, for example, that you had a line that you wanted to offset through the center point here. And so if we had a line like this, and then I wanted to offset it through the center of this circle, I could say offset, and then I could say down arrow through, and then it says select object to offset, and then through what point. And so if we have O-snap enabled, I can glide over to the center of this circle and say offset it through the center. And so that's another way to create that offset. You can not only give it a distance, but you could also give it like through a point. And so if I had a line over here and I wanted to offset this to that point right there, I could say offset. And again, if you hover over long enough, you'll get the commands, and then you can use the down arrow and say through, select the object to offset, and then here's the point I want to offset it through. And so it'll offset that parallel through that point. Now you can see it doesn't reach it. We could extend it if we wanted to that point. So with the construction lines, when we use an X line, it's just basically a line that goes infinitely in any angle. And so as we look at being able to create offsets and being able to create X lines, we're just creating these infinite lines, either horizontal or vertical or whatever angle that we want to create them at. And so here's just some different constructions, and this one is done at a 45-degree angle. And so if we go back to our drawing here and we wanted to erase something, clean that up, let's use a different color for our infinite lines. And then here, if we pin this, you can find the construction line, which is right here. And if you hover over long enough, it'll tell you about it. But essentially it's an infinite line. And so if I go this way, first click and then the second click determines whether it's horizontal or vertical, and it stays in the command. So I'm going to hit escape, go back to it again. We're going to get our X line, construction line, and so it's just an infinite line. So typically I use just regular lines rather than construction lines. You can also draw a line at a 45-degree angle, and so if you draw an X line with a polar setting being on, what you can see, if we go to our X line, click our starting point, and here's my polar button, and so if it tracks horizontally at 0, and then it'll track at 45, and I guess you can't see the tracking line, but you can see the measurement at 45 degrees, and so it's just a 45-degree line. It works better with regular lines. So if you go with a regular line, so that's a horizontal, and then this is showing it at a 45, and that's what the polar tracking does. It gives you that green line, and then you can just type in like 20 feet. And so it's a quick way to make accurate lines at a specified different distance by using this setting called polar tracking. And so polar tracking is good. It helps you. I typically set it up like a drafting board. It'll track every 15 degrees. And so if you've drawn with a drafting machine, which is basically a pencil, then when you draw a line, there's 0, and then there's 15, 30. You get a track every 15 degrees. And then if we track it 90 degrees, we can tell it the length, let's say 15 feet. And it's just a good drawing aid to be able to draw lines accurately at a specific distance. Alrighty, continuing. Changing object limits, and what they're really talking about is just extending the line or trimming the line. And trim and extend are very similar in the way that they are working. And so to demonstrate, we'll select the trim command and we'll demonstrate how trim works. And so here is an example. They have a vertical line and a horizontal line. And basically they're showing if you use the trim command, you can erase, and that's what you will have. Same thing if you undo that and redo that. And so you can trim anything that has a boundary line element. And so it looks for an edge when you trim. And so if we have one line like this, and then another line like this, and let's say that we wanted to trim it, we could say trim. And in the older versions you used to have to hit enter. Now they've just made it automatic. Whatever you decide where it intersects another line, you can trim it. And so you can trim it like that. You can undo it, trim, undo. You can also drive trim by drawing what they call a fencing line. And so this fencing line, it's very quick, and it's kind of like you're using a weed whacker to trim the weeds, where you just power right through and you can trim off any excess by dragging through the drawing entities. You can also trim between two lines, and so if you have a line segment like that that goes between two, and so if we had another line here, and then we wanted to trim, you can trim in between. Continuing. And so that's what they do here. They draw a rectangle with a line, and then they trim in between it. And then we demonstrate the extend command. And the extend works just the same. It just extends lines to a boundary element. Again, it will extend it, but the lines have to cross each other. And so we can look at the extend command, where if we have a line, and we have another line, we can then go to extend and extend that line. You can also extend them with grips. You can grab it with a grip and you can just pull it. That'll work as well. All right, continuing. It's just some examples of trim and extend. Object snap is an excellent command for being able to acquire geometry. And so you can turn the button on and off down here at the bottom. You can go into drafting settings and turn it on as well. And what you're allowed to do is to then grab these different endpoints, intersections, and there's different ways. One of the things they call it is running OSNAP, meaning that it's running as long as it's checked off. And so the items that are running or that are checked off will be acquired. So it'll acquire endpoint, midpoint, center, and intersection, but it won't acquire these other ones because they're not enabled. And so when we go into our drawing, if we look at our O snaps in our object snap settings, the ones with the check marks are running. So we can say endpoint, midpoint, center, and then if I turn these other ones off, it won't acquire those. And so if I wanted to draw a line and I go near an endpoint, it'll give me the glyph and say you have endpoint. Another thing you can do is when you, let's say I wanted to draw a circle at an endpoint, it's already acquiring it, but if you go shift right mouse click and you want something different, so for example, if I wanted to get an intersection, I could go to the intersection command and override it and then get an intersection. And so you can go circle, shift right mouse click, and then you can go and say I want an endpoint this time. And you can also acquire object snaps in that manner. So here's the drafting settings, and you can see it's also enabled in OSnap. And then they just give us some examples showing the acquisition of the endpoints. Acquisition of an intersection. And then the overrides, which would be if you shift right mouse click or if you type CEN, INT, or quadrant, that becomes the strongest OSnap, and then it will use that OSnap. And so just like I was talking about before, I have my running object snaps on with these three, but if I shift right mouse click, I can select any of these other ones. You want to be in a draw command though. So if I'm in a draw line and then I go shift right mouse click, I can go and grab any of these other elements. And so I could say element endpoint, and I can grab an endpoint like that. And so here's an example of a circle. You know, they've drawn a circle in a rectangle, and basically once they have that shape, they show you how to draw it here with the rectangle command, how to draw the circle command, and then there's a summary. So we'll do that and then we'll complete this exercise. So here we are in the try it. And so before beginning, we'll make sure that the object snap icon in your status bar is turned on and that intersection is selected. And then what we'll do is we'll create a rectangle with a specific dimension by typing in D, and we'll make that 4 feet by 2 feet. And then we'll create a construction line, and what we'll do is we'll offset, pick line A, and we'll repeat that. And essentially they're creating these two offsets. So we'll say rectangle, and then we'll say D for distance. Excuse me, I have to put the first corner on first. So first you pick where that's going to be, and then you can type in D for distance. And then we'll specify 4 apostrophe and 2 apostrophe. And then we can either go here or here. We'll go here. And that creates our geometry for that. And then we're going to go to the X line, and we're going to offset this line 3 feet. So we'll say X line, and then we're going to go down and we're going to say offset, and this was down arrow on the keyboard while you're running with dynamic input, offset, 3 apostrophe, select the line, and then the side. Now it seems like it kind of glitched on me a little bit there. I'm just going to draw that in with an infinite line. We can just say, and I think maybe they exploded it and then they offset it to get that at the right angle, because mine is completing the whole thing. So if we explode it, now these are individual lines, and then we use offset. And it's a lot more than it's showing in the textbook, and so it's going 3 feet, so I'm just going to say, I'll draw an infinite line here, turn off my O-snap. Alright, resuming. So what we're going to do is we're going to offset this line 3 feet to the right, and then this one 6 inches. So we'll say offset 3 feet. And what we're doing is we're using the construction line, offset 3 feet, select the line, select the side, enter. And then we can repeat the command with the right mouse click, repeat offset, X line, and we'll say 6 inches. We'll select this line and this side. And so here we have that geometry constructed. And then we can create a circle at the intersection of that intersection, and then erase the construction lines. So we can say circle. We'll select the intersection, shift right mouse click, intersection, and then we can erase these other components. Alrighty, in summary, we've worked with the rectangle command and we've exploded it. We've also used the offset command, and we've created the infinite lines with construction lines, horizontal and vertical, in a specific angle. And then we've also used the trim and extend commands, as well as the object snap commands. Alrighty, that completes this video review of Chapter 3.